Welcome, cannabis enthusiasts, to a brand new episode of Grow Weed at Home with Kyle Kushman. I'm thrilled to bring you an incredible installment that promises to take your knowledge and appreciation of the cannabis world to new heights. Today, we have something truly special in store for you. We're honored to be joined by a distinguished guest, the one and only Marcus Richardson, renowned bubble hash expert and the mastermind behind Bubble Man's World. Get ready to embark on a mesmerizing journey into the world of bubble hash making. Throughout this episode, we'll be diving deep into the art and science behind creating the best bubble hash in the world. From the selection of top quality starting material to the meticulous extraction techniques, the Bubble Man will share his decades of expertise and guide us through the secrets of crafting premium bubble hash. Whether you're a seasoned grower or just starting your cannabis journey, this episode promises to leave you inspired, enlightened, and eager to elevate your own hash making skills. So sit back, relax, and prepare to be enthralled by the knowledge and passion of Marcus. Let's learn, let's grow, and let's embark on this extraordinary adventure into the world of bubble hash together. All right, everybody. So today, here we are, as promised. We have a fantastic guest. It's Marcus Bubbleman Richardson. Thanks for coming on, my Bubba.
Dude, thanks for having me on. I mean, listen, I'll be straight up honest. I reached out to you.
Yes, you did. That was an honor. That was such an honor. It made me... Matt, did I not immediately glow and be like, oh my God, that would be so great? Yes.
Yeah, definitely gave you a chubby.
Well, dude, that's kind of it's not the beginning of our story, but it's certainly, I'll never forget the day you got the you got to have a show at the Cannabis Cup, and High Times was sort of giving you a chance to move into a new field. You know, you were already writing for them and you had done the whole Adam's Garden and all of that awesome stuff. But then it was like, you had this opportunity, and I remember you were taking it pretty seriously, and I was one of your first guests.
Yeah, they didn't give me an opportunity. Basically, it was okay, you're going to Amsterdam again. You're going to do the same old thing. You're going to do a grow seminar. And I'd been there 2 times before, and I'm like, I want to do something different. And they were like, what? I said, I'm going to put on a show. I'm like, what kind of show? I said, I don't know. I'll come up with something. And so literally I went and had cards printed like the Jerry Springer, blue cards that said the Grow Show on the back. And this is a true story. It's so funny you brought this up because I didn't think of this. I was going to start the show with another story. I showed up in Amsterdam without any plan. I figured I can, I forgot how hectic it was. And literally the night before I stayed up with Steve Bloom, we wrote the outline for the show. And the morning of, I woke up early and went to, what's the name of that pancake house that's right in the Domplatz there?
The Panhoken?
It's a tourist place, right? And so we sat there and ate, and Cosmo wrote out the chicken scratch of all the notes that I had written for the show that you couldn't read onto my Grow Show cards so that I could actually do the show. And and that led to a historic controversy, didn't it?
Yes, it absolutely did. That was it was a whole wild experience the way it actually played out, because of course, it played back to Soma, and Soma, who we're friends with both of us at that time, and Soma, was also friends with Mila, and Mila was of course not overly excited that I was doing my own bags, and I was doing it from a different perspective than she chose to do it from. And so I was having some pretty good success. And obviously you doing the article in High Times prior to your Grow Show was a big help. It was a big exposure. I had been already sort of popularized on Overgrow and Cannabis World and CannabisCulture.coms, but High Times was like a whole different level. You're like, yeah, I'm going to write an article about you, dude, after we met in Switzerland. And I guess instead of getting some photos from me, you were like, I'll get some photos from Soma. And you're like, hey, hook me up with some bubble hash photos. And he gave you some really beautiful ones. But the problem was that, and the reason it got taken out on you was that Soma knew to deflect that energy by telling, when I was over at his house, he had bubble bags out on his thing, right? He's like, I love these bags. There's more control. Instead of just 2 bags, I can make higher quality resin. But if Mila went over to his house, he would take the bubble bags off the little hanger and he'd put isolator bags on. So she was under the full assumption with, and you kind of can't blame her, that those photos were isolator hash, not bubble hash. And that's what she ended up blowing up on you in front, like at your show. Like it was like literally during the filming of your show.
Yeah, I put on a whole show, right? I had the bong babes rolling joints, and I told the audience if they clapped really loud that they'd throw a lot of joints out into the audience. We're having a good time. Rocker T came on and did a song and closed the show, and it was really I couldn't believe it. It actually was coming on really well, and so I'm out in the audience like Jerry Springer, and there's a time between skits where I'm taking questions. I interviewed you, and then I'm out there and I'm taking questions, and this woman comes up to me, and I honestly didn't even know who she was. It wasn't until after the show that somebody told me who that was. And I didn't even know who it was when it was happening. So we're both learning new things about this story. Isn't this great? And so I'm up there just in the show, like really, I mean, like I'm like in another whole world. For the first time, I'm putting on a show, like a show in front of people, and I'm concerned with what I'm doing. And she asked the question. It was something about, do you realize that I made the first bubble bags? And I didn't know. I had no idea. And I basically brushed her off. But to finish this in context, I actually spoke, because I had done a story about you. Mila called me at the offices in High Times just a couple of weeks before I went to Amsterdam, right? And she had mentioned to me, she brought me up to speed that, I came out with these isolator bags a long time ago, and it would be nice if you gave me some press too, right? And I made this promise. I said, oh, absolutely, I promise. But I didn't know I'd never seen a picture of her. The only thing I talked to her on the telephone. So even after that promise of what I was going to do, and she came up and I had no idea how to handle it. And I was like, thank you very much. Because I didn't even know it was her. So I couldn't even legitimately follow through on it was really funny.
And I had left. I wasn't even in the room anymore, right? Like after you interviewed me, I bounced. I should have stuck around for the hilarity to ensue, but I did not.
That was fun. I was going to start off the show with Switzerland when we met in Switzerland. Can you remember what year that was?
I want to say it was 2001. And the reason I want to say that because Breeder Steve, myself, and Scott Blakey, i.e. Shanti Baba, who were all in Lugano at the time, had all just had baby daughters born that year. Really all within like 20 days of one another. Like his daughter was born on the 31st of March. I know that because that's my birthday. My daughter was born on the 13th of April. And then I can't remember which one, Shanti Baba. But so that was kind of this weird sort of coincidence that was occurring. And of course, it was sort of Steve that brought me out to Switzerland. He was like, come make a bunch of hash. He had owed me some money too that I was going to sort of collect on. It made sense. And then, bumping into you guys was just serendipitous.
Yeah. And no coincidence. That was the first time that I ever saw bubble hash. Do you remember you made a batch, and then before we went to dinner, in your hands, you made a chunk of hash that looked like a little piece of bit of honey. You remember those old candies, Bit-O Honey? And I'd never seen that before. That was the very first time, and it was fresh. And we weren't going to try it until we let it dry or cure at least some or something. And then we came back from dinner, and that's when we indulged and went on with a very amazing trip to Switzerland. That was, nonetheless, it was definitely 25 years ago.
Yeah. No, it was literally 2001 because our daughters had just been born. Steve wasn't out there really long at all prior to his daughter being born. So yeah, that was a long time ago for sure, and good times, man. That was a super trip. Like Switzerland's an amazing country. It's so small, it's so beautiful. It's like German in the north and Italian in the south, and then you get this whole French quarter that's completely French. It's very unique little country. That's and from being from British Columbia, being from the West Coast, it's very West Coast esque. You know, it's got these just epic mountains and beautiful skiing and snowboarding and creeks and just it's beautiful. It's breathtaking.
You absolutely, in my opinion, you come from one of the most beautiful parts of the globe, without a doubt.
Yeah, yeah, I
There's
love
no
the West
doubt that you've
Coast, man.
stayed there for so long, and so well, everybody's gotten a little bit of history that we've known each other since we were like in our 20s, and that's almost high school.
Yeah, it really is. It's
So
pretty wild.
let me ask a few questions. Actual, be a little interviewer here. So, you know, a few questions that maybe people have been following you that you haven't been asked. So, you're native to British Columbia, correct? You born and raised.
I wish. I actually was born north of North Dakota in the Bible Belt of Canada, Winnipeg, Manitoba, right in the center, like the God forbidden anus of Canada.
Ah, I love how you said that. Yeah, I did not know that. I probably told me that a while back, but that's really interesting. And then how old were you when you migrated?
I believe I was about 23 years old
So it was
when I
your
came out
decision.
here. Yeah, we were just like, of course, both my wife and I were like, let's go out there, let's start a life out there. In fact, how it happened was I had my mentor, Ron Hickey, who's just an absolute savage maniac. This is an amazing man who's just he'll bend over backwards to teach anyone how to grow cannabis. He had one of the first hydroponic stores in Winnipeg, and he taught an enormous amount of people. He developed that 32 pipe system that you've probably seen since the 80s. It
The
fits
round
like 30.
white pipes with the black plugs on them.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So he designed that system, the waterfall reservoir, like 25 to 30 years ago. Like unequivocally, that was him. So he did all sorts of wild stuff like that, and he I rented a house in a fairly affluent part of Manitoba, and I was pretty young with his help. And he was like, "Look, we're going to build you." It had a huge basement. He's like, "We're going to go down there and build some false walls, and we'll get you like a nice 1,000 square foot grow down there." And he like had guys come in and build it. It had a secret door to get into under the
I
staircase.
love those.
And literally, dude, this grow was so beautiful. I think it was like 14 lights and like four veg split into two-thirds and a third, and it was all wired beautifully, and it had the big parabolic, HPS bulbs, Hortilux bulbs. And a week after they finished building it, the landlord called and said, "Oh, I just want to have someone to come in and do some." I can't remember what she called it. It was like some sort of like basically where they come in and measure the fucking house. And so the guy's in the basement. He's like, dude, a huge section of your basement is missing. And I had to basically get all the lights out of the grow room, put a couple of trees like way in the back with my two iguanas, and try to convince this guy this is my iguana room with the secret door under the staircase that I had to bring him under. So he told the landlord, and the landlord was like, "Yeah, you're evicted." So after we built this incredible room,
I wasn't expecting that. I
oh, yeah.
wasn't
Well, this is
expecting
how I
that.
ended up moving to British Columbia. I was so pissed off. I was like, okay, you know what? Fuck this. This is so ridiculous. It's time for us to go to BC. And so it really was the big push, putting all that time and energy and, 2 months of build out into finally just being told it was a beautiful house and it was comfortable and it was off the beaten path. It was just perfect. And,
So did
you
you
know,
move out? Did you have contacts, or did you just move out into another country on your own? Just
well, another province,
see,
but
I couldn't even get into
it might as
Canada.
well been another country. It was
For
super trippy, dude. Trust me. Like we
for all
came
these
out
years I've
here.
known you, I haven't been able to get into Canada. I had a company for 10 years that made my nutrients that were made in Canada, and I still couldn't get into Canada.
Yeah, it's bizarre the whole Canadian American relationship with trying to keep each other out. It is
I look,
definitely.
I look with the way things are now. You guys are kind of lucky because you have this awesome border, right? You have the Arctic Circle, and then you have us. So it's like you can control that. It's like we got
To a
idiots down the road.
degree, but if you look at our country, 90% of the country lives like right at the US border within like an hour to 2 hours. All of our cities are like right down there. So if anything ever goes down that's really serious in America, like we'll be, yeah, of course. Like we'll have to go wait. Don't get me wrong, we'll have a lot of space to go north, but there's nothing up there.
But until
It's like
then,
we
you have health care and we don't.
Kinda. It's gotten worse and worse here. I won't get into the politics of the country, but it was the Canada you're thinking about definitely existed like 20 to 25 years ago. And since we got this sort of new prime minister, it's gotten a lot different.
Yeah, but isn't it relative to how much worse that the U.S. has gotten too? I mean, we're just living in. I feel like I wake up and I feel like I'm living in a Mel Brooks movie. Like he did Spaceballs Part Two, the United States. You know?
Yeah. I know, it's wild. It definitely is. I mean, and we're not too far off, to be honest. It's like we're not too far off. We're your brothers from the north kind of thing, like when people are like Canadians always want to like disassociate themselves with Americans, but like the whole thing that makes Canada Canada is that you guys are a huge influence on every aspect of our culture. It would be like, I mean, not only that, like you guys are a huge influence on every aspect of everyone's culture. Nobody exports culture the way the US does.
That's
They just
interesting,
don't.
but because the America does United States doesn't really have any culture. We don't have any
Yeah, you do.
we don't have any
You're the
storied culture.
storytellers. You have Hollywood. You're the storytellers, and
We
those stories are the culture that
we
you're
have
exporting.
we have entertainment and we have Silicon Valley. That's
Yes.
what we do better or
Yes.
as good as anybody in the world. But we don't have tradition or we don't have a holiday that's distinctly the United States that we pass. Well, okay, we do. Let's.
Right.
I'm going to get off of that. I'm going to ask you. So you're in Canada now. You've been there
Yes.
forever, and you know what? It's hard to deny that you've become a luminary in our community. And to me, I'll define that a little bit. A luminary, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens by deliberate intention. And the intention that you had was to make a mark in this world. And you certainly have with Bubble Hash and Hash Church and Whistler Tech. And, I don't know how many other successful companies you've got going on, but I want you to tell me a little bit about that so we can get caught up about the shop talk. What's going on with your newest tech these days?
Well, all sorts of things in that sense. I mean, I've definitely been working with Whistler Technologies for, building out sort of an industrial commercial equipment that doesn't sacrifice the purity and the quality that's there for the scaling up, because generally people are always afraid to scale, especially in the
You've already
cannabis
said it
industry.
all. You've
Yeah.
already said it all because and because there's nothing like that here. You know that, right? So nobody thinks like that. You cannot get anybody with millions of dollars to invest to think like that. So go on, please.
Yeah, so we're just pushing the boundaries and the sort of innovating in regards to that equipment. We've got some pretty awesome engineers that are really just like engineers at their core, and they've been getting into hash and cannabis more and more and more over the years as they develop this equipment with the help of heady hash makers like myself. And we've got a sales guy by the name of Tyler, and one of the engineers, Andrew, is also into the heady culture. So that always helps when you're building this kind of equipment. There's a lot of people doing the equipment on the commercial side now, but they come from manufacturing and fabrication, which is great. You need that side of the puzzle. But you also need the grower, the hash maker, the guy who's going to be putting the product into these pieces of equipment, who will understand the pain points much differently than the person. It's just like anything in cannabis, right? You've got all these sort of big money guys that came in and sort of they have this corporate culture, and they didn't really respect the people who were from the legacy, and vice versa. The legacy people were like, oh, these corporate douchebags, we don't. But if they understood that you need each other to sort of operate in that corporate landscape, but still bring in that actual culture of the grower, hash maker, the heady culture, you always need those two. I've always said it, like, both sides always think that they're kind of the best, kind of like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, but really alone they suck balls. But when you put them together and you create that third little entity in the middle, the Rolling Stones, that's the magic, right? Where you can create that synergy. So,
and it isn't even just the ideas; it has to be the right people, right? Because I've gotten in and out of, you got to have the right people at the right time in their lives. Everybody's got to have the right amount of ego, the right amount of self-confidence, but the right amount of lack of ego too, right?
Totally, man. It's not an easy. It's literally like winning a lottery if you can nail it. But it's what entrepreneurs love, and it's fun. And I'm having fun with the company. I was, pretty exclusive for the last 5 years. My contract with them just ended, my exclusive contract. So now I'm able, in my consulting, which I'm doing a lot of these days, able to access different calibers of equipment, because there's no doubt about it that Whistler technology is at the very, very top.
Beautiful. I've seen it. I've looked. I've studied it as much as you can, online and stuff, and absolutely beautiful. And
yeah, it's completely it's really for EU GMP and GPP, more so than trap labs. Not that I don't have utter and complete respect for trap labs, but you don't need to over-engineer the equipment to that level for that kind of lab if you're not, highly regulated. So this equipment is highly regulated. The way it's designed is for highly regulated markets.
I dare say that you have not smoked any particulate matter in 30 years.
It's been at least 24 to 25. You're not wrong on that sense.
That means leaf. For you neophytes out there, that basically means leaf or stem or cellulose or. I'm not going to go on because I'm not that smart.
But you're not wrong.
Thank you. So, man, in
fact, let me say one thing on that point before you go on. I would love to design in my brand. I have the Bubbleman brand, and it's operational in some states. I would love to create the product where I do an extract and it's in the jar, and then I take the flower that I extracted it from, and I dry that out, and I create cardboard boxes out of it. So the resin itself goes into the bud-made box, which is basically cellulose and fiber, which is exactly what cardboard is, cellulose and fiber. So flower isn't too far off. It would be very easy to turn buds into a cardboard box.
Is this the first time you've spit that little idea, or have you? Because manifestation, I believe in wholeheartedly. So I already think you're going to have it done somehow.
Yeah, I've mentioned it just a few times to sort of friends in passing. I don't think I've ever mentioned it on a podcast or anything. So this will be the test. I think it would just be amazing to get that tech down, take all your wet flour and dry it out and get it pressed and card flipped and card printed on. Like, how sick would that be? If
you probably could manage to get a little scratch and sniff on the back too.
It's basically like resin deconstructed.
That's awesome, man. I do have a few questions here that I did want to make sure, because I want this to be informative to people, not just entertaining. I think I'm having a great time. Usually if I'm having a good time, then everybody else is too. So since we're on the subject of bubble hash, usually I ask people, give me a couple of tips on, growing at home. What I want you to do is give me a couple of pieces of advice for, home bubblers, we'll call them.
Home bubblers. Well, I will say this, everyone
how deep
has
do you have to get, right? Because I know, you can get freezers for this. You can work in a freeze room. You can get really, really deep. But we're gonna lay it out here for the home guy. A couple of tips that are, above all, going to improve his general work.
Well, I mean, number one tip is that the bags are the word of God when it comes to the quality of your resin. And although cognitive dissonance will allow you to delude yourself into thinking you have better quality flower than you may have, and we've all been subject to that, me included, the resin will not allow that. It's very difficult for the resin to allow that. So, and what I mean by that is they're the word of God. When you, countless people, when I release these bags, would message me and say, "Hey, how do I get my hash to melt like yours is melting?" And I'm like, ooh, no, that's not actually a technique in the hash making. That is actually something to do with the caliber of genetics that you're running. So that basically means what are the gene syntheses that are present in those in that genetic code and which ones gene synthase. So that's like, if you have a THC or a CBDA gene synthase, that plant can produce CBDA. If it doesn't have the gene synthase in its genetic code, it's unable to produce that. So this is where breeders will figure out what's present in a plant, even if it's not dominant, and then they can be like, oh, this thing it has the THCV-A gene synthase. We can use that as breeding stock to bump those numbers up, and then I won't get into breeding.
Is that what we would just call dumpers?
Well, I mean, if they were the gene syntheses of resin, and they could be dumpers, and then if they were also the gene syntheses of volatile organic compounds, they could also be like super flavorful and tasty dumpers, right? It all depends on what gene syntheses are present. And so that's the genetics, right? What genetics are there? Then it comes down to, are you able to create an environment that allows that plant to sequester the components that it requires, when it requires, where it requires, and how it requires? Which I'm always, when people say, what's the best way to get great resin? I'm a big proponent of living soils. It doesn't mean it's the only way. And I've smoked incredible material resins from non-living soils that have blown me away completely. So I'm not saying it's the be all end all. I'm saying that the intelligence that the fungi has, the mycorrhizosphere that is coating your root system in a living soil environment, is an intelligence that we cannot quite understand. It has a direct link of communication with the plant where it's like, I need some of this. Boom, it gets it. It sequesters it, it prepares it, and then it delivers it right to where it needs to be in a way that, I mean, sure, there's probably some PhDs out there that are very intelligent and have somewhat of an understanding, but I can almost unequivocally say that until we have like some super level of sentient AI singularity type shit, nothing is going to be stronger or smarter
Okay,
than the
so
fungi.
I'm going to take you forward. So we've got the material, okay, and give me a little bit in the technique of how to handle it. That's what people need to know.
Well, I mean, I like hashtag never touched. As a macro photographer, I prefer that the plants don't get touched. I don't want people rubbing up against them with t-shirts or hoodies because then these big fibers stick in there. It's the same from the hash perspective. When I start macro photographing resin and I see when there's buds just leaning over that people are brushing as they walk by, and I get under my macroscope and I realize the resin glands have been torn off, they've been stretched and pulled and contaminated, and I'm like, ugh, don't do that. So I like never touched. I don't mind running dry material or fresh frozen. The best of the best materials, even dried out, will produce incredible quality hashes. Now, the fresh frozen pathway really became a thing for people to have more of a chance of acquiring full melt. So whereas old school growers like yourself and people that we know have been curing these monoterpenes, these very caustic, rough sort of terpenes out of the plant. That's why we cure flower. We get rid of that harsh stuff. Well, in the world of fresh frozen, both BHO and wet wash, we're trapping all of those monoterpenes. Now, as you raise the terpene profile percentage, you increase the likeliness of a shimmering, melty glow as you hit that hash. That's not necessarily the same thing as a perfectly grown resin gland that will melt into a liquid and boil upon heat going near it. Those are
I'm
different
picking
things.
up
So
what you're
once
laying down. I am picking up what you're laying down.
Well, there's even another way. So not only will they use fresh frozen for that, they'll then take the hash afterwards. And this is, with water hash, even for home guys, listen, the recipe is super simple. If you follow the very simple recipe of mixing and settling and pulling, you end up getting what is there very effectively. The only very difficult part that involves subtle nuances is the drying of the hash. That's the trick. Drying it.
No, I have questions before then. So step one is dry your flower and cure it with the sugar leaf with the sugar leaf on it, right? Whole plant, dry it and cure it, and so you're going to dry it, you're going to buck it down, you're going to put it in containers and cure it the way an expert or the way the best, and that would be before you would prefer, taking away all the other perfections and imperfections. You're in your home, you grow it in your closet, you grew a really great batch, you're going to dry it slowly, you're going to buck, and you're going to leave all the sugar leaf on it, and then you're going to buck it down, and you're going to cure it. Is this what I'm taking from you?
Well, this is what you're taking from you, but the guy next to you could have said, so what you're saying is you want me to cut it down all fresh, freeze it, flash freeze it, and then run it fresh. What I would suggest is both, to find out what you like. And you'll see that the old school guys prefer the cured resin, and the younger guys, they're more now like addicted to that, just that crazy grab by the neck. So
good answer.
Fresh is what's most popular right now.
Good answer. So now, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to hang it whole, and I'm going to put it into jars, and I'm going to cure it for a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to trim those. I'm going to put them in jars loosely, and then I'm going to trim off all the sugar, and that's what I'm going to make. No, wait, there's no trimming anymore. We're using the whole buds. So you're going to clean that off of all the stem, correct? You're going to really break it down small. Now that you got cured buds. And this is where I'm going to start my process. Okay, anybody can do this at home. We haven't broken anything, made anything too heady, right? Like that is non-understanding. So, is this a good? You with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I got my 5 or my 10 or my 20 gallon bubble bags, and of course you don't want to use tap water, because water is a source of contaminants, correct?
It absolutely can be. Now, keep in mind, from the perspective of the home user, it's not the end of the world. From the perspective of the commercial producer, there's regulations to follow, and you want to just make sure your product is clean.
If you follow me, I'm just following a simple path. I'm still a simple man. I'm domesticated. I don't have a factory. I don't have a grow room. I have a grow tent. So it's real simple for me. So I'm just bringing it along at a real simple pace, but from the man who's done it all. So now we got our bubble bags, and so I'm going to use either filtered water, or I'm going to go out and buy some purified water. I mean, that's worth the money, right?
Yeah, it's not too difficult to do, for sure.
Okay. Same thing with the ice, right? So, I've exactly. So I found
ice with the water that you got.
Exactly. Back in the day, I started buying clean ice, but you couldn't just buy it anywhere. You wanted to buy filtered clean ice. So now you've got clean water.
You know what they have in most ice?
What's that?
Do you know what's in most ice?
Water?
Fluoride.
Water
Water is in all ice exclusively. Fluoride is only in some ice. But yeah, you buy it and you're like, why the fuck are these motherfuckers putting fluoride in this? This is not even sensible.
And they don't even have to list it.
Yeah, it's often listed though.
Look, I'm just hammering the basics really quick. So you got your material. That's how you do it. You got clean water, clean ice, and so now, to me, the next important step is cold water. You got to be patient in between the steps, right? You got to be patient in between the steps. You got to put the ice in the water and let it sit for a certain amount of time. You got to be patient.
You're not wrong. This is one of the things that the fresh frozen people will say. When you freeze the flower, putting the flower into the water allows you to use less ice because the flower is so cold it reduces the heat of the water.
You're just proving it's all about expedience and or expense. What I'm talking about is simple and pragmatic. So again, Bubbleman says I'm not wrong. So you're going to sit and you're going to wait good 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. Be patient to get your water as cold, nearly as cold as the ice, right? Before you take your material out of the freezer and put it into the bucket.
Well, also there's a second part to that you want to pay attention to, which is even the more important part, which is, first of all, you want the temperature to be basically 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. You want to make sure that when you're putting dry material in, that you allow it to absorb water, and that's going to take at least 15 minutes, because if you just start mixing some bone dry material that goes in there, it'll start breaking off pieces of contaminant. And the magic of water hash is that everything floats in the water, while the resin glands, which are still affected by gravity due to their density, they sink in the water, and that's why the whole process works. If you break the material up too small and it loses its surface area size, there's a threshold where small particulate will sink.
Yes, see, I'm bringing you down to the really silly small granular stuff. Yeah, and that was the next thing I was going to say is after patience for allowing the water to get cold, then when you do introduce the material to the water, you need patience again, correct? Because you have to let the material not only get saturated, but you want to make sure the material now comes down in temperature to the same temperature as the water before you start mixing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it's fun. It's like you can geek out on this when you're at home. I mean, really, the process is fairly simple. I know it's scary, especially for people that have never done it before, to just put, water and ice over their flowers or their trim. But when you see what comes out, you'll just never look back. It's just this beautiful sandy material. You can press it. The whole rosin world, we haven't even really gotten into that, but that's huge. When I first released bubble bags, all those people that asked me, hey, how do you get my hash to melt like yours? And, when you hear the answer, it's like, well, you have two options. You can go down a 20-year rabbit hole and learn about the symbiotic relationships of plants and mycorrhizospheres and all of the things that they require, when they require them, and how they require them. You can learn about light spectrums. You can learn about greenhouses, and literally like a multi-decade pathway. Or you could just jam that weed into a PVC pipe and get a can of butane and just like blast that shit into a golden honey, and it'll dab perfectly. And so, unfortunately, 98% of people took that pathway. And I was scared for those people because a lot of them blew up and burnt themselves and whatnot. So when I saw rosin come out, I saw that it was the same. Like most people's rosin is made from mediocre bubble. Like if you get full melt bubble, there's almost no reason to press it into rosin because you're going to get like a 95% return.
Or mediocre weed. You're pressing mediocre weed.
Exactly. Well, that's it. Like I don't know too many people that do flower rosin anymore, but I know that a lot of the live hash rosin, it's very little of it is made from the most exceptional hash. And that's why the people who have it will never have the hash that they pressed the rosin from. And the rosin can look AAA, but if, it was pressed into rosin, the hash probably wasn't. I'm not saying there's not anomalies, but I love the fact that rosin exists. And now instead of people, like imagine being a young guy in high school and just buying like a little bag of weed, and with a hair straightener, you could access dabs, like solventless dabs that you could just drop into a little, like that is huge, man.
It is. You can carry around a little thing in your pocket now. They actually work. That'll tell you the potency of the weed. You can bring it. It's really amazing. And Bubs, may I call you because we're old friends? Bubs, you exist at a level of cannabis production and consumption that all of us, I don't know how to liken it to anything else without demeaning it, because, I do have an ultimate respect for cannabis, and it's really unlike anything else more than it's like. And what I'm trying to say is that the discussions are they're very heady, and I admire how far you've taken something that, like you said, you just, even before pressing and resin, you just, what was the old, it ain't worth the trouble if it don't bubble.
If it don't bubble, it ain't worth the trouble. And that was, listen, that was Rob Clark, who I first ever heard that from. And that's literally how I met Skunkman Sam, by using that logo. I got to give props to Sam, because it really was Sam's sort of quote that he had said. Well, it was pre the Wizard. That was my guy, right? The bubble bag guy. But so when I started the bubble bag company, because Hillary Black had introduced me to Rob Clark, I had met him in 95 at the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam, maybe 98 too. But I bumped into him. I don't know if you remember that Thai food restaurant behind Aryan's greenhouse off the Damrak. It was all like the Katoy waitresses. Like it was all lady boys who were the waitress. It was hard to forget this place because it was pretty trippy back then. But they allowed you to puff. They were super open minded. So I remember walking up the stairs to get into that place, and it was like John Conroy was there, and Rob Clark had the Ruhr, and he laid me out with a hit of the most spectacular bubbly hash, and he looked me right in the eye. He lit it, and then he looked at me and he said, "If it don't bubble, it ain't worth the trouble." And I was just like, that stuck with me for the rest of the cup. I was like, I'll tell you, you got to give Amsterdam and High Times a mad shout out, because that really was the birth of our. I mean, listen, of course, this has been going on for 1,000+ years, and there's been people that have been involved in the prohibition and the fight for, cannabis versus evil for a long, long time. But for our scene, that whole Cannabis Cup, 1989 to whatever it went till, was really profound.
Everybody that anybody thinks of as a founder or a trailblazer in our community was on the cover of High Times. Dennis Perone, Jack Herrer, Aryan, help me out. Everybody, all of them, Keith Stroup, Tommy Chong and Jack. And so, yeah, without a doubt. And come on, there's no way I would be sitting here talking to you, because Kyle wouldn't have been invented, and I never would have gotten sent to Switzerland. And, it really is worth a shout back to all those people. And I still keep in touch. Like I said, I spoke to Andre this morning, who wished
That's
you
awesome.
well. And,
And remember when we raced up the mountain to try and get the sun to raise so Andre could get the picture of my wife for the cover of
Yes.
High Times magazine?
Yes, I do. On the top of over across the river from Italy.
Yeah, yeah, Campione, exactly. It was Lago
Yes.
Lugano.
Yes, I do remember how frantic he had to get this picture. Yes, it was
Yeah,
great.
I just remember the sun was going down, and then we were driving around this mountain so fast that the sun was going up.
Tell me you still have that picture.
I don't know if I ever got that picture, to be honest. Yeah, I'll have to see if Andre still has that 2001
Yeah.
Lugano,
I'll
Switzerland
have to
photo.
ask him. So what else we got here? I mean, everybody, most people know about Hash Church that you brought back after a hiatus, and now you're, I don't
Yep.
know, you got how many hundred episodes have you done of Hash Church?
Oh, geez, I don't know. It's been a while since I did one, but they're always just right there now. I've done so many. I will say that it was 167 without a break, without missing, in like 7 or 8 different countries. Like I just never missed. If it was a 9 a.m. on Sunday, West Coast time, I made it. I mean, I traveled through a blizzard in Brampton, Ontario with two Rastafarians after landing from Kingston, Jamaica, while they were driving in the blizzard to get me to this house so I could turn on and make the 9 a.m. hash church, host. It was absolutely mental. I don't know what was driving me, to be honest. But I still do it now and then, and I've got some good friends that I would like to bring forward. I forget about the importance of that conversation, and that it wasn't, it wasn't a business. It wasn't to compete with anything. It was something that was standalone on its own. We never took sponsors. We never, we never monetized the content because I was afraid that it would affect the integrity of the content. And so we just never monetized it. But oh man, did I turn down a lot of sponsorship offers for hash.
Even though, we are obviously, I'm here because of Homegrown, and I've been working with Homegrown Cannabis Co. now for 8+ years. And, but I just think it's all about perspective. And I just try to bring on people that have unique perspectives, something that has to do with cannabis, of course, or our community, and then we just chit chat, and sometimes people have products that they like to talk about, companies that they've made, they're entrepreneurs, and sometimes they're not. But like you said, it's unfiltered as far as nobody's brought on for the for the main reason of presenting a product.
And I'm coming around a lot more. I mean, listen, you remember my party back in the day, Legends of Hashish. That was very much the same thing. I refused to monetize it. I gave away any money that we made from ticket sales over the cost of throwing the party. I would give it to like the Cannabis College or the Cannabis Compassion Club in Amsterdam, or whoever was, wherever the country was we were throwing it. We would donate that money away. I was somehow like, I just can't monetize this. Legends was always about celebrating hash, not talking business, not like, promoting oneself or one's products. And now, because it's a different world, back then we had smugglers and people that were under the radar of Johnny Law that didn't want to be photographed. So there was no cameras, now Legends. Yeah, now it's like there's multiple film crews filming everything, recording everything. Like there's drone shots, there's, full sponsorships.
I can't keep up. Like the young guys, that's the young guys don't need me to teach them how to grow anymore. There's so many good growers out there, man. And certainly I can't keep up on my Instagram with all the production value everybody's got, learning how to press the buttons and make it look like they have all these videographers. But it's about perspective, and unique perspectives are still valuable. So that's why we're here, and I'm enjoying this little chat with you. And, I really hope that someday, the last time we saw each other was in Jamaica at my wedding, where you ended up in the bar after hours, where I decided to have my after hours party. You didn't even know. And we partied for 3-4 multiple hours together. And I smoked that was the last time that I smoked any quantity of really good hash.
Was that like 2014?
That was 2014. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was when we got married.
Yeah, that's the year. That was the year my son was born. So we had a baby with us that year.
Yes.
Yeah. I think my buddy Kimbo invited us all onto his big 51-foot yacht, and we had like a part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kimbo just passed away. We'll pour a little out for Kimbo. He just died of cancer recently, but he was a great dude, man. And yeah, he just offered that. He's like, hey, if you want to bring any of your friends on my boat, man, like just put the invite out. So I remember, you and Susie were there, and Ramo and Sandra were there, and both my sons, my older son who was around 11 or 12 then, and my youngest son who was like 2 months old, they were both there.
That was a great trip. And man, I keep thinking how I can find a way to bring us together again for a reunion. Who knows how that'll happen?
It's a must. I would enjoy that a great deal.
I would as well. I have a well-worded question here I think's worth asking. It says, as a respected figure in the cannabis community, what industry issues or trends do you feel are important for us to address or discuss? What's on your mind?
Well, I guess, right off the bat, the industry is happening in a lot of different places simultaneously. So I guess I could speak to both kind of Canada and the US. Obviously, the big issue in the US is that it's not fair to brands and companies to have to operate in every single state when with the amount of states that are allowing cannabis now, at this point, federal law should pretty much kick in so that the U.S. can export their product around the world. Potentially, I would love to see the US hopscotch right to the top of the game again by literally allowing the importation of hash from other countries and flower from other countries to bring that sort of old school vibe back, but also to create their own federal, but not over-regulated like the Canadian one, but created something where it's like, kind of between where we're at and where we came from. Because I know a lot of people think it's the old days were the dream days, but that was monetizing prohibition. The money was based on people doing jail time, and there's a karmic debt that comes with that. And that's why you always saw these amazing, like just kind, beautiful families, growers, like just awesome people getting robbed and then getting busted and then getting just like one thing after another. There's always this sort of karmic debt.
What do you think about
selling?
What do you think about the psychedelic community, more specific, like the psilocybin, the mushroom community is trying to approach it where they've learned from cannabis, and they don't want decriminalization or anything like that. I mean, do you see anything positive in that? Do you have any reach or friends in that community?
Oh, absolutely. I was just with actually Dennis McKenna in Vancouver. I was with my youngest son, and I bumped into Dennis at this mushroom event. I think it was like the 43rd annual Van Dusen mushroom event, which was just spectacular. And they did a whole talk on psychedelic mushrooms. And so at the core, at least of the psychedelic mushroom community, it's always been an incredible core of people. And I've been going to those sort of psychedelic gatherings for 20 plus years, where you could go and meet, Ralph Metzner and Jonathan Ott and Paul Stamets and Terrence and sort of all of these guys that were writing these books about these compounds back in the day. That's sort of my psychedelic community. Now there's a newer group that will expand. I always do welcome the newer group and focus on the good of that, but also realize that there will be some wolves in sheep's clothing that make their way into the psychedelic community, as they always have. Even if you look at rainbow gatherings, there's always been these sort of small percentage.
Seeing as you are kind of plugged in, to that kind of, do you think that there is any chance, specifically in the States here, that there'll be a recollection of the experiences and the actual relative danger as opposed to the benefits, and that legalization will look more like, it should, or is it going to get wound up in something red bureaucratic? Is there a chance that they're going to find a different route?
I mean, I surely hope so. I always have faith. Keep in mind, it's always the people fucking this shit up, not the plant medicines themselves. They're good to go. It's the people who think that they know what's best. If we just listen to these plants, and, I'm not, for instance, I'm not against there being some regulations for producing a medicine like cannabis. I think it's fine to have regulations. Now, don't make them insane and impossible, but definitely have levels that you won't accept for heavy metals and pesticides and anything like that, molds, yeast, mildews. These are important things to know, what the potency of the product is.
Can't sell to children, can't have a dispensary around the corner behind a school, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, there's some crazy ones in Canada where you couldn't even see inside. They made you cover up the windows, which made it very dangerous for the people who work there, for people that would want to go in and rob the place, because you could just go in, lock the door, and then be like, rob the place, and no one from outside could see you. Was just changed.
You made me think of something. Do you think that? Do you think it would make a big difference if the people who are trying to legalize mushrooms for personal use, if we simply separated any type of commercial activity from first just legalizing it for personal use without any restrictions. In other words, you hurt somebody, there are laws. If you hurt somebody, generally you're allowed to hurt yourself. If you're at home and you chop your finger off, you don't get charged with mutilating another person. You did it by accident. You chopped your finger off. So you know what I'm saying? Do you think that that would be a good idea to just simply try to legalize without the idea of giving anybody the right?
Listen, in a sense, it is. So that's where mushrooms are, at least here. They're, it's only once you dry them that it somehow becomes an issue. And I wouldn't say there's a police force in British Columbia actively enforcing.
Is that your distinction that you've come up with?
No. Here in Canada, they're illegal once they're dried, and I guess it's because when they're fresh, they're so diluted of their drug compound that it's just, I don't know what the numbers are, but it might even be that way in some of the states. I don't know. But
That's
it's
pretty
definitely
silly.
that way in Canada.
I understand it's pretty silly, but it's kind of
I
like
pick them every year. I picked a bunch of psilocybin mushrooms this year: cyanescens and ales, and maybe some stunsies.
I think the big ones out here in LA, which are like replacing all the housewives' antidepressants, are albino Avery.
Yeah, so those are potent Stropharia cubensis cultivar.
And everybody's doing them in gummies and microdosing, and I do now and then. I tried to find out if it would be a good thing for me to do on a regular, and without stereotyping it or without even putting in a negative, I couldn't find a regular dose for me that was helpful. There was always some kind of a come down. So it's an irregular use thing for me.
How much were you like? Because generally a microdose of psilocybin, you shouldn't even feel it. It's so subtle.
Sure. But what I found was that after, if I even got up to 150 mics, that at the end of that day, there was still some kind of a come down, and that's my own physiology. And so
yeah, you were feeling it.
I couldn't find a neutrality where I only got that, where you take it and you forget you took it. And 3-4 hours later, that's why I had such a good time. That's what it was. That's the great thing that I would love to be able to do and take every day.
It really depends on your definition of the microdose, because there are definitely different definitions of microdose. And some people, they'll be like, oh, I take like a third of a gram or a half a gram. I'm like, whoa, that's like really like what I talk about as a microdose is a true microdose. It's such a small amount. There's no psychedelic effect to it. It doesn't affect like your appetite it's just this super, super slight nudging of your overall being and how you feel. And it's very subtle. That's how I like it myself, which is very, very, very small amounts. I don't have a way to test my psilocybin, so I don't know exactly what I'm taking, but I know with the dry mushroom that if I eat like a stem, and they're very thin stems, a little thicker than semolinciatas, these are the wavy caps, the cyanescens. One small little stem is a perfect microdose where maybe I might feel something for 5 minutes, like a little bit like, oh, I feel like I took a dab or something. But it'll just dissipate in 5 minutes. I like to keep it below the threshold of feeling it, and then I can do it every day. And after like 20 or 30 days of that, it builds up the effects of how good you feel.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm so glad we got into that. It's
crushing depression, actually.
It's an important thing nowadays for just people to have options other than going to the doctor.
Of course.
You know,
man, absolutely. And particularly the psychiatric and mental health problems, those types of medicines are, SSRIs and whatnot, they're fairly harsh. So to at least have something else on the table, I'm not saying that every single person shouldn't take those drugs, because maybe some people get helped by them, but there's a lot of people that don't. And when you take a drug for depression or suicidal ideations, and the top side effect may cause suicidal ideation, that does not line up to me. That's insane.
No, and they can get away with saying it right on the television. You're not paying attention. The TV's running in the background, and you hear may cause death.
I know. What the fuck kind of side effect is
Oh,
that?
so
That's a seriously harsh side effect, actually.
because they listed it, they're no longer liable, and America runs on liability. So that's all you got to worry about.
God bless America.
God bless America. We love it here, you know. So other than us getting together, we talked about the bubble hash, and we talked about how we met, and we talked about how much we want to see each other again, and we gave respect to the old days of high times. And I think before we signed on, we gave a little respect to some of our missing soldiers. You know, we miss. We're not going to name. We can't name everybody, but we miss Frenchie, and we miss Subcool, and we miss Eddie, Franco, and Jack, and yeah, all these people, you know, that were taken from us, but we remember them, and we smoke in their honor, and we mention their names often, and we recite the stories and the things that they taught us, and that's what it is, being an OG, an old timer, old school industry, an old school culture type person. You know, it was like you said, you know, sure, there's plenty of people that came before us. We didn't invent the cannabis culture, but boy, was it rocking when we were early, and High Times was still an icon of America, and every stoner in the world bought it or stole it off the news rack.
Back when the Dutch were still open-minded.
Right, before they went right wing.
Holy shit. Just like closing down the red light, trying to shut down, like making, you know, the Dutch experiment where it's like 10 coffee shops and 10 companies that will represent and produce all the flower and the hash for each of those coffee shops. It's they want to lose the value, which is the importation, right? And I get it. They want that coin for themselves. But if they were smart, they would go to those countries and say, look, we pretty much fucked your country over for a long time, especially back in the day, because the Dutch were the original sailors. They taught the Russians how to sail, and Russia damn near took over the world. So like the Dutch, they were out there sailing before many. And they could go to these countries and make deals where if they legalized it, you could import it into, it would just be a special thing when you don't try to control it. And you still, in my opinion, the perfect world will be when cannabis is legal everywhere, but I can get Lebanese hash or California OG Kush or, you know, whatever. You need to be able to get it from that spot.
It's
where
not
you
Monsanto Lebanese hash.
Right? Exactly.
Hey, brother, you know, look, you know, a lot of people don't have a palate. A lot of people can't taste the difference between a McDonald's hamburger. A lot of people don't have a palate for cannabis or hash. A lot of people don't have a palate for culture. But it's important for people to get together and just pay a little reverence, tell a few old stories, remember what the old times were, and pass it on to the young ones who weren't born when you and I met and smoked our first bowl of bubble hash.
Totally, dude. That's what's up. I love it. I do love it.
So, hey, man, I just want to thank you for being on. This was a total blessing, and you are a chieftain among chiefs in my heart. And if you ever have anything of consequence or humor or of any type of entertainment value that you want to share with us again, you just call us up again, and we'll do this again.
That's what's up, man. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed hanging and talking to you on a Sunday afternoon here. It's just a beautiful day, blue sky, and just seeing your smiley face and hearing your voice was indeed a pleasure. I look forward to seeing it going live.
Me too, man. Uplifting is what I'm talking. It was definitely uplifting. So with that, we're going to sign off, and you have yourself a great day. And I would say stay green, but that doesn't apply to you.
No, it doesn't. Last thing I want is green hash. You can tell me to stay gold.
Stay gold, my brother. Well, now that was enlightening. Marcus Bubbleman Richardson is not just an expert on bubble hash and entrepreneurship, but he is genuinely an extraordinary gentleman. I want to thank you all for being here for another episode of Grow Weed at Home with Kyle Kushman. And please tune in for the next extraordinary episode of Gua!